Hello students, it is Tuesday and here's your literature lesson for the day. So we are going to start a new unit. We've just got finished the novel Cheaper by the Dozen, and now we're in the part of our textbook where we're going to talk about poetry. All right, so we're going to be introduced to certain poets and in our textbook, and we're going to kind of dissect the different types of poems that there are. There's a wide range of topics you can cover in poetry. And I think you'll also realize that not all poetry really has to rhyme. So the very first poem that we're going to take today, we're going to take a poem a day. And basically, I'm going to take the first, so we're going to hear about a poem from Vincent Benet today. We're going to hear tomorrow about a poem from Robert Frost. Then you're going to take a quiz on both of these poems. And I'm going to tell you right now that basically I'm going to give you all the answers in these lessons. So if you watch the lessons, you should be very prepared for the quiz. And of course, you also have to read the poems as well. And so speaking of which, what we're going to do, we're going to, first of all, get introduced to our author, Vincent Benet. You'll notice the year he was born and the year that he died. And this poem was written around 1922, the poem that is entitled The Ballad of William Sycamore. And bottom of page 275 in your textbook talks about a ballad. A ballad is basically a poem that tells a story, is known as a narrative poem. So like there's a narrator telling a story of what's happening. The Ballad of William Sycamore is a narrative poem, but it can also be known as a ballad. All right, a ballad means a simple song. And we are going to read the poem, or you're going to read the poem. We're going to go through the parts of the poem, but I'd also encourage you after the lesson maybe to Google the Ballad of William Sycamore. And what you'll find is that the words of this poem have been set to music, and it is a song that few artists, sounds like, have recorded or done. All right, so let's hear a little bit about our author. Vincent Benet's first volume of poems was published when he was 17, and in 1929, John Brown's Body, a long narrative poem on the Civil War. If you remember John Brown from our study of the Civil War, he was the one who protested slavery and ended up being hanged for an uprising that he started. Stephen Vincent Benet won a Pulitzer Prize for poetry, and many of his works display an intense feeling of patriotism. Now, think about 1922. Coming off the World War I, where you heard about last week and are actually continuing to study in world history right now. So after a war, particularly a war that we win, there tends to be a very high amount of patriotism that takes place. And so that could be a reason why there was some patriotism present in this poem as well. So the Ballad of William Sycamore. Here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to pause the video at this time, read the ballad on pages 273 and 274. Then I'd like you to come back, okay, and then we'll kind of take out some lines here, line by line, and discuss it. And then after you're done here, you should be very prepared for a quiz, to take a quiz. But here's what I would recommend. When I give you the quiz tomorrow, Wednesday at around noon, watch both lesson videos first before you take it as a form of review so that you can be prepared for it. So I'm going to pause the video right now. Actually, I'd like you to pause the video right now, and then go ahead and read the poem on those 2 pages. Okay, I'm going to assume that you've read the poem already. So let's go through this poem. We'll just take certain parts of this poem. Okay, so first of all, poetry is different from other forms of literature. And poetry, like we said before, does not necessarily have to rhyme. Okay? We're going to talk about a couple poems in this unit, and this particular poem talks about U.S. expansion. Okay, so in 1790, only the land east of the Mississippi was a state or territory. By 1870, everything between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans belonged to the United States government. So in stanza 1, how does he describe his father? His father was a knotty hammer, right? And so what would you think that that would mean if he was a hammer? It means he's probably pretty tough, right? Because hammers are something that we use to drive nails into walls. Okay, so basically just, he's describing his father, he's describing his mother, and then basically he's telling us about his life. If we take a look at page 274, it talks about the Western wagons. Now, some of you have done the Oregon Trail, right? And that is talking about that time period. So this particular, on the trail of the Western wagons, he's describing people moving westward expansion. So basically, he's kind of telling a story of American history that William Sycamore lived through. So then also the youngest fell with Custer. Custer is you can look him up, and he was a general that kind of got ambushed by Native Americans in a battle. The Alamo is also a historic event. So basically, he's Stephen Vincent Benet is giving us a history lesson throughout this. And then it says the speaker in line 63, so right here, and I died in my boots like a pioneer with the whole wide sky above me, as the city men tried to move me. All right, so basically the speaker dies when the land is fenced, when he is no longer able to expand and go where he wants to go. And then it talks about how now I lie in the heart of the fat black soil. So he has died, and he becomes part of the earth and the cycle of seasons. Would you say that he, is not very happy with the life that he led? I don't think I get that impression at all. Okay, but rather he's very, doesn't seem like he's felt that he's lived a sad life at all, but rather very content with the life that he's led. And basically, throughout this poem, we can chart his William Sycamore's life from beginning to end. All right, and in this ballad, the author encourages we, the reader, to envision a man who is content with his life in the country. So he looks back on his life and, just kind of summarizing it all, is very content with the life that he led in the country that he lived in. So again, you hear that whole idea of patriotism as a theme here. He talks about his father in the very first stanza here. It says that he was quick on his feet as a what? Go ahead and look for that. And shout it out when you find it. So he's comparing his father's quickness to a what animal? That's right, fear the deer. Okay, and so would you say this is a humorous poem? No, some poems can be humorous, but this isn't one of them. Would you say that William Sycamore led a sad life? Poor William Sycamore. No, he doesn't want anyone to feel sorry for him, and nor does he think that he had a sad life, and we should not think that either. All right, so this is the setting here is a dramatic one. And I also want to point out too that as we are having an assignment in English language arts on writing a descriptive paragraph, this is a pretty descriptive ballad or narrative poem. He doesn't just say the birds were flying. I'm looking at line 70, like the wild geese flying, and I lie and hear the meadowlarks sing, okay, and have much content in my dying. And so, he doesn't just say, I'm happy in my, he uses words like content. So again, these are good things that we could use to help us become more descriptive writers as well. Okay, so everything that we talked about in this story, in this narrative poem, is going to be on the quiz. So make sure that hopefully you get a chance to rewatch this again. So basically, it's the life story of William Sycamore. He's recounting different historical events and looks upon his life very fondly. Our next poem is going to be by Robert Frost, and that will be the second part of the quiz that I'll give you on Wednesday. So that is the lesson for today. Basically, your assignment is to, if you haven't read this poem, to make sure that you read it and then be prepared for a quiz tomorrow.